Today I'm here with Sultan Nassymbayev. Sultan is currently working at JP Morgan in investment banking in New York, and in my opinion, he has a really interesting story and background, and I'm really happy that you took your time and I can learn something from your experience, and maybe you will give us some helpful advices for the younger students regarding the career. But before we start, Sultan, please introduce yourself briefly in a few words.
Thank you very much, Alex. My name is Sultan. I'm originally born and raised in Kazakhstan, lived there until I was 17, and then moved to New York with an idea of becoming a professional soccer player. Got approved and stayed in New York and played for the state school, and then got a bunch of invitation to play for different universities. Unfortunately, injured myself in the process, ended up being at Penn State, but without the scholarship, without athletics, and just found myself loving different finance clubs on campus, became interested in more the Wall Street and investment banking in general. And since then was just grinding, networking, landed the sophomore internship at JP Morgan TMT, came back for the junior internship, and then came back for the full time. And it's been more than 2 years since then.
Well, very interesting. Maybe in the beginning, an icebreaker question: for which football club or soccer club do you support?
Well, first, I think it's a football club, not a soccer club. I just missaid it. So my favorite football club is Chelsea, obviously the best club in the world. We haven't done so well in the last 2 years, but I've been supporting since 2005, 4. So it's been a long ride.
Do you also support FK Astana or
Uh,
not that much?
because I'm from Almaty, we mainly supported Kairat, but never Astana. It's a main rival.
Uh-huh. Fun fact, I have at home, I have a jersey from Kairat Almaty.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe I should bring it here, show you. Okay, nice. Could you walk me briefly through your journey? Maybe we'll start at school, high school, then how did you choose your university, and in the end, how did you end up at JP Morgan? And if there are some interesting points, I will just interrupt you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think my journey is a bit different from others, from my peers and colleagues. More specifically, as I mentioned before, I've never even thought of finance world and investment banking before I injured myself. So my whole life I was thinking about football only, and every day I was waking up with an idea of becoming a professional. So when I came to New York, I came to finish the last grade of my high school, and I think back then I didn't even think about my career. I didn't even think what major I want to choose in university. I was picking colleges based on their football program and how good they are. And when Penn State reached out, I think it was a no-brainer because they have a really nice athletics program, American football, European football, tennis, etc. So I made that decision to go to Penn State. And unfortunately, right before I was supposed to start playing for them, I injured myself. And then at Penn State, my first week started going through different clubs, organizations on campus, and started thinking, what can I do now in life? Because I felt empty, and I felt that hole inside of me that I had to fill up with something else. And I remember when I saw a big banner, it was Penn State Investment Association, and they had this big banner saying, "We place 100% of our students on Wall Street." And the only thing I knew about Wall Street was the movie with Leo DiCaprio, Wolf of Wall Street. So I thought it was big models and bottles, and everybody was walking around with Ferraris and Lamborghinis. So to me, it was an attractive way to start my career. And obviously, the more I learned about it, the more I realized how untrue this perspective was. But I still became interested with the finance world, with intricacies of Wall Street, and I kind of dragged myself into it. And I filled that hole inside of me with this huge challenge of getting into Wall Street, which was, as I've mentioned before to you personally, I think everybody was telling me how impossible it was for a student from Kazakhstan that was playing football the whole life, that didn't speak English 2 years before that. It was all odds were against me. I just decided to pursue that dream because I thought if it's impossible, I'll make it possible. And that's exactly what happened.
Wow, really inspiring story. But my question is, your dream was the whole life to become a professional football player. and then you get injured. How did you anyways could motivate you? Because if this happened to me, I don't know how I would react in this situation. What was there in your mind that kept you motivated?
It's an interesting question because I'm not gonna lie, I wasn't motivated at all. I think I injured myself in April, and from April to August, when I started going to Penn State, this was a period, probably the darkest period of my life. I didn't know what to do. It was just pointless period of my life because I haven't done anything. No training, no practicing, no thinking. It was just me in Kazakhstan going through days as if it's the last day of my life. So it was depressing in some ways, but at the same time, I think I realized right on the fact that I got injured might have happened for a reason, and I genuinely believed in it for probably 3, 4 months until something happened. I had this idea in my mind that 5, 10 years later, I'll look back at this injury and I think, thanks God that it happened. And that's exactly what I'm doing now. I genuinely think that down the road, we'll see all of our downturns, mistakes, and unfaithful moments as something that we've learned from and then became greater. So in my opinion, these 4 months, I sat with myself, started thinking about what can I do, start believing in my inner self. And I generally have this idea if I was successful in football with all these hardworking skills, practices every single day, going through challenges, I can take these skills and put into something else and I'll be as successful or even more successful. Because I generally believe it's all about hard work, motivation. It's all about putting the time in, the energy in, the passion in, and you just have to find your industry or your passion and then put everything you can into it and you'll be successful.
Mhm. Yeah, I also think if the injury would have happened maybe 2 years later, then you had your focus 2 years only on becoming a
Yeah,
professional football player,
yeah,
then you get injured, and then it's maybe 10 times harder to achieve a successful career. So maybe it was the real right yeah moment to happen. Yeah.
exactly. Everything happens for a reason.
Yes. Okay. So we mentioned that you work at JP Morgan. Maybe you can walk us through your typical day. When do you start? How long do you work? Which projects do you work on? And what tasks, yeah, do you have in your role as an analyst, if it's financial modeling or creating presentations and so on? I think it's really interesting for the viewers here.
For sure, it's a great question. I think one aspect of this job that I love, and obviously there are some aspects that I don't love, but this one I really love, is the fact that every single day is so different. There's no single repetitive day in a year, in 2 years, in 3 years. And that's what keeps you on your toes, keeps you motivated, and every day you wake up not knowing what you're going to do today, and that keeps it refreshing and it keeps it away from a typical routine of a job from 9 to 6. So if I will try to break it down with patterns and with a template of what the day looks like, I try to wake up not too early. I wake up around 7:45, 8. I try to hit the gym real quick in the morning, and then I go to the office around 10. Obviously, if something comes up before that, I work from home. And then at 10 in the morning, I'm in the office, start reading emails. There are a bunch of emails coming during the night when I'm sleeping, and obviously I do sleep sometimes. And these emails kind of pile up quickly because typically I'm on 5, 6, I would say 4 or 5 live deals and 3, 4 other projects on top of it. So as you can imagine, everybody has priorities, deadlines, timelines, and everybody is pushing things from different angles. So when I go to the office, first thing I do is I kind of go through all of the emails, try to understand where each client and each project is on at the moment. And then from that on, I kind of have this mental game plan for the day. And that game plan changes 5, 10 times a day, depending on if I get staffed on a new project, if a new project gets alive real quick. And funnily enough, I'll tell you a little anecdote.
Mhm.
Each Monday, we send what's called intensity to our manager, which is essentially projecting how many hours per client you will do next week. And I always do it when I'm going to the office, when I'm commuting. And I always have this little understanding of what each project will be like. And while I'm sitting in the subway to the office, I come to the office, everything has completely changed, and not a single projection is correct, and everybody's all of a sudden trying to get the deal done this morning, and the deal that I thought would be live died down this morning. So it's all fun and games, but at the same time, it's a game of two sides, right? It's always great to have something unexpected, but when you're making plans, especially now when I have my wife and when my friends are coming in, I try to make plans like dinner plans on Fridays, Thursdays. Most of the times, it's tough to even plan within the same day. I just have to see like an hour earlier, can I do it or can I not? So that's the second part of the story. But overall, I read the emails, then I start doing the work, get lunch, eat in front of my desk usually, come back and work until probably 6-ish, 5:30, sit on different calls, on different meetings, and at 5:30 I realize, do I need to stay in the office for the next 5-6 hours, or can I go home and work from home? Most of the times, especially with my team, I'm happy to work from home. I commute back home, have dinner with my wife real quick, and then sit and usually around 10 or 11 p.m., you start to realize how long your night will be. If it's not long, I just sit around 1 a.m., wait for any immediate work comments. If not, I go to sleep. And sometimes the nights can get a lot longer than that.
Interesting. I didn't expect it that the work can also be flexible, that you can change into working from home, but especially when you have a wife, like in your case, it's really, really good, yeah. What was your hardest work? Maybe you remember working hours per week.
Yeah, it's a good question and good memories for me and for my wife. It was this summer, I think, or last summer. I had I had 3 weeks back to back with 110 plus hours. And I'll give you a little background of what happened. There were multiple live projects that I've been on, and I got staffed on a new live deal on top of everything I had. And obviously, as an only analyst on all of my projects, nobody could cover for me mainly,
Mhm.
so I had to do all the work. And that meant that since the very early morning, from like 8 a.m., I had to start working all the way until usually on these 3 weeks, it was around 5 or 6 a.m. There were 3 days back to back, I think, where I came back home around 9 a.m. and then I showered, had a quick nap, 30 minutes, and then came back to the office. And that was my routine for 3 days. It was fun. It was really fun because to me, I
Oh,
just see that as a game, as something that challenged myself. I never saw that as like, oh, I'm going to depression, that's really tough. And I think mostly it's because of my wife, mostly it's because of my mindset and because of my background in athletics. I think I always had this mentality of even after the toughest days, there will be good days. And I was wishing for these good days to come sooner.
yeah, wow. I have really this question in my mind. How do you motivate yourself every day going to work, yeah, at 10, working like sometimes open end? Is it because you have a goal or a plan for the next years, or is it just because the topics, the projects are so interesting that you are motivating yourself, or you don't need to motivate yourself because the insights are so valuable? Or are there anyway some days where you think, oh, today is not a good day and I have to really push myself out of the bed?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the love to the game can only motivate you so much because when
Mhm.
you're sitting at 3, 4 in the morning, you don't really love what you do. It's essentially like you just have to get through it, and it's just the teamwork. What I love about the job is the teamwork aspect. It's really comparable to what I've done in football because when I'm sitting in the office 5, 4 a.m., I'm never alone. I'm sitting next to my associate, I'm sitting next to some other people on different projects, and just sitting there in the office, dark at night, everybody's eating unhealthy, everybody's like complaining. It's just, I'm not gonna say it's a fun place to be, but it's not a dark place to be, as if when I was alone sitting in the office. So it's good to joke around, banter around with these people, and it keeps you up. But to your question, I think the biggest reason why I'm still here, the biggest reason why I'm still doing it, is I have why in myself. I know the reason. I have the motivation. I know exactly that this is just my job. I'm going there to get my money, to get my experience, to get my opportunities, doors open, and I'm coming back home. I have my wife, I have my family, I have my friends, I have my grandparents to take care of, and all these things are way bigger than my job. So I always have these inner thoughts to myself when something's going wrong. I'm like, this is just a job. I'm gonna go through it. I'm gonna get the task done. I'm gonna get my salary. I'm gonna help my parents or friends or family. And it just helps me get away from that job. Because a lot of the times when people get depressed and dragged in and really burnt out in this job is because they think that the job is them and they don't separate themselves from the job. And obviously, every bad comment you receive, you think, oh, I'm a bad person. Every time something bad happens, you take it to yourself. And that's easy to get depressed. For me, I have my home, I have my life, and then I have a job, which is separate from everything.
That's a really nice message, and especially um, advice for the younger viewers here, students, if they are in their first internship and someone is shouting at you at work because the PowerPoint presentation is a little bit off, you don't have to take it so near to yourself. If you
Yeah,
you come home, just forget about it and learn from it, and then everything will be okay. Yeah.
exactly.
Let's talk about family hobbies. How do you relax or recharge from work? You mentioned that you go to the gym, or do you play soccer sometimes, or is it not possible with your injury?
So if there was a single chance of me stepping into the field and playing healthy, I would still play football to this day, and I would still try to achieve it professionally. But I think fortunately or unfortunately, my doctor told me that my injury is not ACL. You can't really get a surgery for it. It's basically loosened tendencies around my kneecap, which are still loose. You just have to do physical therapy for probably 2 years straight. And I was always lazy to do that, so it still pops out to this day. If I do something wrong, if I step on my foot incorrectly, it just pops, and I hate it, but I'm used to it. In terms of hobbies, if you would have asked me 2 years ago, before I met my current wife, I think my hobbies would be different. Now it's mostly watching movies on the weekend, just experiencing different cuisines in New York. And New York is great in that sense is the fact that you can live here for 4 years straight, try different things every single day, and you'll still never reach the end. Like there's so many things here to do, and we just on the weekends when I do have a time off, when I do have some couple of moments away from our computer, we try to go to the city, do something fun, especially during the warm periods of time in New York, usually from April to October. We're always out. We're always trying to do something. Now in the winter time, it's mostly just watching Netflix.
Okay. I also was in New York 5 years ago,
Oh, wow.
and I was really impressed by the skyscrapers and the whole like energy of the city, but unfortunately I didn't manage to watch like an NBA or NFL game. This is still on my agenda. But a question about again JP Morgan and New York City, Wall Street. How was the feeling walking around Wall Street then the first time when you walked in to the office, heading up to the higher floors, knowing, okay, I will work here now for the next years, maybe. Was it like a dream, or how does it
Absolutely.
feel?
I think for me, it felt even better, and I'll give you a little backstory. My first day at JP Morgan, it wasn't in New York and it wasn't near skyscrapers. I was sitting in my apartment in Kazakhstan because it was 2020, it was COVID year. So my first internship was actually first year of COVID. Nobody knew what to do, nobody ever
Wow.
experienced Zooms, and nobody ever done working from home situation. It was always in person. And for me, I remember in March before my internship, they said, you can't work from Kazakhstan. You have to be in New York for different tax reasons, legal reasons. And I said,
Mhm.
well, if you can get me a private jet from Kazakhstan because nobody was flying that day, I'll happily fly to New York. And then after a couple of iterations with HR, I think I'm the only person that was allowed to work from Kazakhstan or ever internationally that year. And it was a very interesting experience. I was waking up 6 p.m. when everybody was coming home from my family, and I was
Right.
going to sleep around noon or 1 p.m. as well. It was a completely different time zone. But as I've said before, I think to me it was very fun. It was a game. I was waking up, going to my computer. I never thought that this is a real life work. It was just my computer playing music and then doing stuff. So for me, it was a game, and it was a lot shorter than it should have been. So after I got my return offer for the junior internship, I was way more excited to see New York and the skyscrapers and see the building, go to the floor, as you mentioned. And then when I actually came my first time in my junior internship, it was just a dream come true. I remember that feeling, putting up a suit. And obviously, we didn't have to wear suit and tie, but I wore the full suit and tie. I had the documents with me. I felt so professional walking in New York. It was a good day. And then obviously, I had to drop the tie after the first day because everybody told me to, but it was like the dream come true the way I imagined myself. Nowadays, obviously, no suits, nowhere close to suits, walking like this to the office, maybe a shirt inside, and it's a completely different feel now. I just feel like it's getting to a routine point. I just go to the office, come back, and I try to think about being in the moment, looking up and thinking to myself, this is what you dreamt about, but sometimes the days can get long and you can forget these thoughts.
That was my next question. So now you are not like dreaming or feeling like very excited if you go up to the 50th floor, for example. So it's becoming like a routine sometimes.
Yeah. I think, um, and I always try to have a little, at least some walk outside, especially now when it's cold, because when I'm freezing, I don't have any thoughts about work, about stuff that I for the future. So I'm in the moment. So I love walking in the freezing temperature, and it brings me grounded up and just down to the earth and thinking about the fact that you're here because the younger Sultan really wanted you to be here. And all the things, the little problems that you imagine in your head are all very minor compared to what you have done in the past. And that thought always keeps me alive, keeps me grounded, and I just love to do this from time to time. And obviously, as you mentioned, as much as I love this industry, it gets to the point where you do it every day, like the commute part, the lunch part, the dinner part, that you get used to it. As a regular human nature, it gets to a routine, but I always try to take myself out of the comfort zone, and I always love, and I'm comfortable being in an uncomfortable place, and that's just my part of nature. As soon as I feel like I'm doing something without even thinking about it as a routine, I have to switch something up. Otherwise, I'm not growing professionally or personally, and nothing is changing.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think after going through such hard times, nothing can shock you anymore because you mentioned you wake up in the evening, going to bed the next day at lunch.
Yeah,
I think it there can't be nothing worse than this
exactly.
like work day. Really
There is a
interesting.
saying in Russian and Kazakh, it's hard in training, it's always easy in work. And I think it was exactly what happened to me. My first ever experience in this job was extreme from time zones, from working place, from not seeing anyone, from being in Kazakhstan rather than New York. So everything now, as you said, is way better than it was.
You've mentioned your family in Kazakhstan. The first weeks, days in New York alone, far away from your family, how was it? Did you miss them? How did you adapt to the US culture? Because you told it was your first time in the US. Um, how did you manage to to start a life independently?
Yeah, for sure. I think my first every time in New York, I didn't even feel it because I was in high school playing football, had a bunch of parties, friends, so I didn't really understand fully that I wasn't in Kazakhstan, I was in New York actually. And then when I started going to the university, that's where I felt it because now I was fully living alone, doing all my things by myself, all the little routine stuff that I always had my family do. Now I'm doing, I'm the adult. So it was a tough transition, but it's something that I had to go through early on in my life. And obviously, not to say that I was always alone. Like I tried to come to Kazakhstan 2 times a year at least. Sometimes my parents would come to US. It's some kind of um, it's just at that point in time it made sense for them to come to New York, and I had to travel to New York as well. So it made sense for us to meet up there. But then when I started living as a professional, as a Wall Street banker alone in New York, it was a completely different story. I think now I'm fully an adult and I'm genuinely having my home in New York rather than in Kazakhstan. I had less so of willing to go travel to Kazakhstan as often as I was doing before. And then I met my wife, and then I fully settled down. Now I fully have my home in New York. And even when I do travel back home to Kazakhstan, I have the opposite feeling. I want to go back to US, to my
Yeah.
family, to my home place. And it's a completely different mindset now.
Mhm. And where do you see yourself in the future? In America, or are there any thoughts returning to Kazakhstan?
It's a
Uh,
great question, and my end goal is always be back home in Kazakhstan. As much as I try to name New York my home, I think the real home, the real place I was born at was Kazakhstan. And if I can, well, first experience as much as I can, earn as much money as I can, get as many connections as I can, and open up as many opportunities as I can, then I can go back home to Kazakhstan, and then I can help others. I can do much more that they can potentially do at this age. So I think obviously at the end I have that goal. But for now, for the next 10 years, I think US is giving me so many more opportunities than any other country can possibly give me. Potentially, we thought about Abu Dhabi, Dubai, because it's so much safer to raise a family there. So it's one opportunity, but overall, I think this is a place to be for now.
okay, nice. Let's change again the topic, go more into a career perspective and also some like technical things. What do you think is an most important characteristics or skill a student need if he wants to break into investment banking? What does he need to know? And yeah, what skills do you have to bring?
Yeah, I'm not gonna go through technical part because I think pretty much if you just Google
Yeah.
investment banking interview, you'll see millions of different questions that if you prepare, you will be good enough for the interview. So I think I'll talk a little differently. My main thing is your mindset. You have to know your why because everything else will be easier. And if you don't know your why, if you're just going with the flow, if you think you're doing interviews just for the sake of interviews and everybody else around you is kind of forcing to do so, you will never have this inner motivation to do so, and it's visible from outside. I've talked to so many kids in the last 2 years. I interviewed kids. I had official last round interviews as well. And it's so obvious to see when a person is driven, is motivated, is willing to work as much as he can, as willing to work as hard as he can, compared to a person that first is smart, second is from a good school, and third is more polished. But I can see that he doesn't want it enough. And this job is not about how smart you are. The job itself is not hard. The technical part, especially, I think it's a ninth grade algebra or some kind of a math. It's nothing extraordinary. It's just you have to understand the basics, and then you have to be willing hard to learn industry trends every day. You have to be passionate about what you do because otherwise your basic knowledge is never going to be enough. And that's another part of this industry that I love is the fact that you have to be in touch with the industry trends. You have to be updated every single day. Otherwise, nobody needs you. And to that point, my biggest my biggest advice to everybody that ever thought about investment banking as a career path is sit down with yourself, put your phone away in a different room, take everybody from that room away, just yourself and nothing else, no distractions, and talk. As weird as it sounds, I've done it in the past as well. Just talk to yourself out loud. There's so many more thought that will come in, and so many things that you will learn about yourself that you never thought of, or maybe thought of or was scared of, that you will open up differently. And just talk honestly. Do I want this? What's my plan for the next 5 years? Do I see myself sitting in a corporate job, going to the office every day? Do I see myself traveling? Do I see myself doing some kind of a startup? And just trying to align with your own ideas of what you think your life should be. And most of the times you come to conclusions that can be completely different from an investment banking industry. And then just start thinking, do I really want to do it? And if not, that's even better. I
Yeah.
think, the best answer possible you can get in this process is you don't want to do it. because the last thing you want to do is actually end up in the place where you're working 100 hours a week, let's say, and you don't like what you do, you don't like people around you, you hate the industry. It gets to a very, very dark place. So the best thing you can do is early on think about it, understand what you want. If you want to do it, nothing will stop you. You will have no limitations, no ideas of what you can or can't do. You will just do it. And that's exactly to my point. If you have your inner why, how will be so much easier. And that's biggest thing. And obviously, I guess slightly touching the technicals. I don't want you to learn these guides and try to memorize all the answers. I want you to think about each answer from a secondary thinking perspective. Ask, why do I need to know this? For example, a simple question as like, walk me through a DCF or what is a WACC? Think about what is a WACC? Why do people even need a WACC? Why do large companies like JP Morgan calculate a simple formula to get cost of capital? What is the cost of capital? And if you're curious enough, if you're interested enough, I think you will dig yourself into that rabbit hole of questioning this and then getting an answer and then questioning this. And it's kind of like a snowball effect where you go deeper and deeper in the concept. And at the end of it, you will see that the answer that is given to you by the guide is so simple and simplistic, and you know so much more than you would have if you just learned the answer itself. So always being curious, intellectually curious, goes a long way.
Thank you for that message. I think it's the most important thing. I also have contact with so many interested students who want to break into IB, and sometimes they are asking me, Alex, if I have an interview, what do I have to answer if they ask me what is my motivation? But if you can't answer this by yourself, then you already have to stop, in my opinion. Or why I want to change from audit, Big Four accounting to IB, what can be my motivation? This is the first step you have to take before applying or before thinking about changing your job. And as you mentioned, in the interview, everyone can smell it from 1,000 kilometers. If someone told you that you have to work in banking because you can earn so much money and it's a good career perspective for the next years, or do you want it really from an intrinsic perspective? And yes.
Exactly.
Okay. I don't know if there are any questions from my side.
I think quickly, I didn't mean to interrupt you. To that point, I just remembered something that I've learned a while back when I was going through interviews. There's an interesting point that was brought up by my advisor in Penn State, and it is, what is one question that you are always expected to receive in all of the interviews? Do you know, Alex? The very first one. Yeah, it's the very first question. Tell me about yourself.
Or the first one, I wanted to say, how are you?
Like exactly. Well, yeah. It's two questions then. How are you? And then tell me about yourself.
Yeah.
Just like in our interview today, you asked me the same question. Just tell me about yourself. And it doesn't matter the industry, it doesn't matter the place, it doesn't matter the country. Every single interview will start, can you tell me about yourself? So if you know for a fact that you'll get this one question, why don't you prepare to the 150% answering the same question? Like if you can polish the beginning of the interview, polish it as much as you can, and you essentially have 2 minutes, 1.5 minutes to advertise yourself, to advertise your story, to get the person in front of you excited about you, excited to talk to you, and excited to ask you questions. And what happened to me, interestingly enough, obviously I was as prepared as I possibly can be, technically, behaviorally, market-wise, everything. But when I came to the JP Morgan interviews, I had 3 interviews for 30 minutes. I don't think a single guy or girl asked me a technical question. And the reason to it is because I was grinding to get my tell me about yourself answer right. And because my story was well polished, I knew exactly what will be of interest. I knew when I would say something about football and kind of stop, it will be a hook. And the next question will be, well, tell me about football. What happened? and then I'll say something about the injury and I'll stop. And I know they will ask what kind of injury. So I'm leading the dialogue, even though it's an interview for them, essentially. So the beginning of interview is so important, and you know exactly how they will start it, and you know how you can answer the same question that they will ask all the time. So that's probably a second biggest advice is don't ever underestimate the importance of that question.
I also have the same experience. Always I mention that I love football, where I played, which maybe I don't mention which club I support because that will be the question from their side, or that I'm a YouTuber. This is also very interesting for all of them. Of course, if there are technical questions, you have to be solid, but it's not the most important thing. And the most of the applicants forget the first step is the personal fit. And you
Exactly.
can be as much as prepared for the technicals and can build a DCF model in 2 minutes. If you are personal, not a fit, then they will don't let you go a step further.
Exactly. Exactly. You're 100% correct.
Thank you for these advices. The last question for today, also regarding the interview. What was the most crazy or unusual interview questions someone gave to you? I heard that sometimes they ask you, if you were an animal, what would it be and why? Do you have any experiences like that, or?
I think when I was a student, I had some experience of this, and I remember I had this whole tracker with all the questions I might potentially ask and my personal answers. And one section was like the crazy questions, and I even had the answer for the animal question. I had the answer for how many tennis balls will fit in the Empire State Building and stuff like this. So I was genuinely preparing for these questions. I don't think I've ever was asked these. I think the craziest question I've ever was asked is, and it's less so hard, it's more so crazy to think about that question and to get the right answer. Is the question itself is there are 8 billion people in this world. And what aspect or how do you think you stand out and you are the best of the best out of the 8 billion of people? And that's a tough question because you never think about these things. You think, oh, I'm good and I need to get to the job and interview and at JP Morgan, but you never think, am I better than everybody else in this world? And if I am, in what aspect? So that really makes you think. And I think my simple and funny answer was, I think I'm the best and biggest Chelsea fan you can possibly find in this world, and I know more about the club than anybody else. And obviously, it's a fun answer. You can get your different answers to it, but it's a very interesting question to think about.
Okay, thank you also for this interesting insight. I think that's all for today. We gained some interesting insights, valuable advices for your career. If anyone is interested into getting in touch with Sultan, I will link his LinkedIn. I don't think that you have so much time to answer all the questions, but if there are some questions or I don't know, someone wants to ask something more about JP Morgan or the work in America. Sultan, thank you very much for your time, and hopefully we will see us again.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure, Alex. I really appreciate it. To your point, if anybody has any questions, I will try to answer as many as I can, and don't hesitate to reach out.
Okay, see you. Bye. Have a nice day.
Bye. You too.